Is original thinking dead in Gen Z? Social media offers young people today these plug and play ideologies to try and help us make sense of the world and make sense of our lives. However, there's a huge problem with this. Many people in Gen Z today are simply downloading their worldview directly from the internet. Now, the point of this video is to show you the root of this problem, that Gen Z are taking one or two of these online ideologies and sticking to them rigidly. And this is leaving us stuck when our online worldview is no longer able to solve our specific real world problems. Now, what you first have to understand about our generation is that in our late teens and in our early adulthood, we have faced an absolute mountain of problems. And we are also a generation of terminally online freaks. We are the first generation to grow up with the smartphone, with internet access right there. So when we are faced with these new, strange, confusing problems, it's natural, it's very, very easy for us to go to the internet for solutions, to look things up on YouTube, on TikTok, to ask ChatGPT over asking people in the real world. And this is a big problem because social media generates a lot of social media influencers, of course. And there is an influencer really for every one of these ideologies. The issue for Gen Z is that when we look for a solution to our specific problem, we usually find the influencer associated with that problem. And the influencer, rather than just giving you a solution, they give you their entire worldview. And what's happening to many in Gen Z is that we're not able to separate the good solution that the influencer gave us from their entire worldview. Now, a very well-known example of this is, of course, Andrew Tate, who exploded in popularity during the pandemic, a time where many young men were online and many young men had many big questions about the changing world around them. Now, of course, the algorithms of these young Gen Z guys were more than happy to suggest Tate as the man who had all of the answers to all of their problems. Now, when your algorithm makes a figure like Tate go viral, it becomes very, very easy for you to swallow that person's entire worldview because it's constantly being presented to you. You're not stupid here. It's just very easy for you to take one person's set of ideas, download them, and make them yours. And the issue, of course, is that when that person's ideology is not able to answer your very, very specific personal problems, it leaves you stuck. And where do you go from there? Now, I've identified that there are basically 8 Gen Z ideologies, and we use these to interpret events that happen in the world and guide our actions in our lives. Now, before you start crying, there are within each of these ideologies a number of smaller sub-ideologies or sub-niches, but I'm going to focus on the main big picture ideologies today. Now, when Gen Z people build their ideology online, they do this for 2 reasons. They either want to solve their own problems, and you can see this with young men flocking to Andrew Tate back in the day, or they will build an ideology that already confirms their pre-existing beliefs. For example, a young left-wing person may go online and seek out left-wing influencers who confirm and update what they already believe. And it's the same on the other side, by the way. If we go for the spirituality element of things, a young Christian person might go online and seek out Christian channels which confirm and update their sets of beliefs as well. Now, what happens when this downloaded ideology, which is supposed to provide you with all of the answers, no longer fits the context that you find yourself in your life? Now, I have a very personal story to tell you all about this because I was very, very deep in the online self-improvement ideology from 2018 until 2020, when the pandemic hit. Now, in 2018, I was an absolute mess. I had no job, I had no friends, I had very, very deep social anxiety. I had had stage fright for about 7 years by that point. But then I discovered online self-improvement and a number of other different related things. And I started to develop myself very, very quickly. I overcame my stage fright in about 4 months. I started to do stand-up comedy in the real world, which was pretty insane. And about a year later, I was living abroad. I had friends in multiple different countries, and I completely overcome my social anxiety. So This really entrenched the belief in me that I could continue to grow like this in a consistent manner. That was, of course, until the pandemic hit and I had to go home to my home country and I had to live in lockdown. Now, in lockdown, I wasn't able to go to work, so I wasn't able to earn money. I wasn't able to see my friends, and I wasn't able to go to the gym and get stronger. And that was a real issue for me because it created a kind of a cognitive dissonance. I still really held the belief that I got from online self-improvement that self-improvement could be exponential, that I should just keep growing more and more every single year. I should keep getting better. But the reality was quite literally making this impossible. All the avenues to develop myself that I had were completely restricted. They were taken away from me. Now, it was very, very difficult for me to let go of the idea that self-improvement was exponential. But when this idea ran up against the hard reality of COVID, it turned out to not be true. And that was devastating to me psychologically. I had to abandon the ideology and I was left with nothing. And this can happen with any of these ideologies. Think about a guy online who LARPs as a traditionalist, and he wants to start a family one day. But he goes out into the real world as a young guy today and realizes that it's very, very difficult to afford to be able to do this. Think about a more liberally minded person who goes online and sees many people who they thought they agreed with politically celebrate an innocent man's death, and that's a step too far for them. Think about the young Danish footballer who was something of a prodigy in this very, very financially lucrative career, who convinced himself that he was going to become a Christian monk. Now, he seemed to be very authentic in doing this, but what if he goes into the monastery and has a crisis of faith and a ton of regret as a consequence? These are all just examples that I could give of these ideologies running up against a reality that somebody could experience. As a final point here on the danger of ideology and the danger of ideological thinking, it's very, very low agency. You make yourself dependent on some online bloke's way of thinking, and when you argue this position with somebody in the real world, you're not arguing your own points of view, you're arguing some other guy's points of view. You're like a puppet for his ideas. This is not the way that you should want to be if you want to be a strong person with agency in the world. Worst of all though, the fact that we've downloaded these ideologies means that we are no longer creative thinkers. We've lost the capacity to generate our own specific solutions to the very, very personal problems that we are facing in our lives. And if we are to solve these problems are specific to us, then the solutions should be generated from within. The internet and social media should only be used to help your creativity, not to replace it entirely. You should absolutely be aware that this kind of ideological thinking could be present in you too, if you're not already. And you should absolutely try and avoid it because this kind of ideological thinking is lazy. It has many pitfalls, as I described in this video. And I really, really want to try and combat this ideological thinking in Gen Z by highlighting it through this series. As I said, I do plan to do future deep dives into these ideologies, including where they came from, what their benefits are, what their drawbacks are, and how they impact Gen Z as a whole. And finally, I'm very curious to hear what you think about this. Have you ever experienced this kind of cognitive dissonance where you downloaded a worldview from the internet, it smashed up against your reality, and the two of them could not coexist? Have you ever experienced ideological thinking in somebody else? And it was really annoying, because trust me, it can be really, really annoying. Also, do let me know if there are any ideologies you would like me to cover first. I might well listen to you. You never know. Then, when you're done tapping out your comments below, you should subscribe to my ideology. You should become a blind follower of me. You should like the video, you should share the video, you should hype the video, do all the good things in the service of this channel.